Welcome, curious minds, to The Deep Dive. Today we're plunging headfirst into a cultural phenomenon that, it sold over 100 million copies worldwide, broke box office records, and basically saturated every corner of pop culture. I'm talking, of course, about 50 Shades of Grey.
It's truly remarkable, isn't it? The sheer scale. It makes you pause and consider what really drove that immense popularity. Was it just what everyone assumed?
Yeah, that popular perception is incredibly pervasive. The one you hear everywhere is that 50 Shades was solely about the explicit scenes, the bondage, the spanking.
Right.
But our mission today is to go, far beyond that surface-level idea. We've taken a stack of sources, everything from a fascinating Reddit deep dive into its surprising origins to academic reviews, analyses of its impact.
On publishing, on how people saw BDSM.
Exactly. And we're going to unpack what they reveal about female sexuality, power dynamics, even how modern media spreads. You might find the real drivers behind this global thing genuinely unexpected.
So let's start right there, challenging that common belief that 50 Shades sold because, quote, all women want to be tied up and spanked and dominated. Our sources, they suggest a far more nuanced truth.
Let's begin with something genuinely surprising that the sources highlight about its origins. Because 50 Shades of Grey didn't actually begin as an original novel, did it?
No, and that's a crucial detail often lost. It actually started as Twilight fan fiction.
Fan fiction. Like Bella and Edward.
Exactly. Specifically, an alternate universe, or AU story. Think of it like, imagine the Avengers. But in an AU story, they're all in a rock band,
Okay, got it.
You take established characters, put them in a completely new setting. So Bella Swan became Anastasia Steele, and Edward Cullen transformed into Christian Grey.
Wow, so that original context is like everything for its first audience. These weren't just casual readers.
Not at all. They were Twilight superfans, already deeply emotionally invested in those characters, their connection. The author, E.L. James, was writing by women for women, and she just assumed this deep emotional and sexual chemistry was a given, right from page 1.
So it was built on this existing foundation.
Precisely. It was a slow burn, crafted specifically in a way a female author from that fanfic culture understands explicitly to make women horny. And the original readers were often described as, lonely, inexperienced, super nerdy, and socially awkward in addition to being super horny. They were looking for sexual jollies off via fan fiction.
Okay.
So this context meant that Christian, who started as the idealized Edward, was kind of inherently seen as a not bad guy, even when his actions get problematic later.
Right, because people already had this idea of him from Twilight.
Exactly. That existing canon, that reader expectation, it often got completely lost when the book was published for a mainstream audience who had no idea about the fanfic roots.
So the initial draw wasn't just the plot, it was this preloaded emotional connection, this idea of this perfect guy devoted to this ordinary girl. Fascinating.
Moving into the plot itself, the surface story is, Anna, the plain Jane virgin journalist.
Right. Interviews Christian, the hot young billionaire.
And he becomes obsessed with her, despite her low self-esteem. Then he reveals his BDSM interest, wants her to sign a consent contract.
And this is where the mainstream idea about the kink really takes hold, isn't it?
Yeah.
But the sources are clear. Anna isn't actually into BDSM herself.
Not inherently, no. She often gives in because she's really into him and, wants to make him happy. She hopes he'll change.
So what actually happens with the BDSM in that first book?
Well, it actually culminates in what sources describe as a vanilla wannabe BDSM scene. And it freaks Anna out so much she runs out crying and leaves him.
That's not quite the narrative most people remember.
It gets overlooked. Then, book 2, we get Christian's tortured past sexual abuse as a teen by an older woman who made him her submissive.
Ah, the explanation.
Right. It's used to explain his BDSM need, portray him as this broken person who secretly hates that he gets off on hurting women.
Okay, but what does the actual BDSM community say about all this? Because 50 Shades became the face of kink for so many people.
Oh, they had a lot to say. There's widespread criticism. They argue it completely misrepresents BDSM, portraying it as something reserved for damaged individuals or for sex as control rather than love.
Which isn't the reality for practitioners.
Not according to them. They stress that healthy BDSM always involves clear, enthusiastic consent, open communication. Christian, though, he consistently forces and manipulates consent.
How so?
Using alcohol to get consent, for one, and his contract apparently offered no room for negotiation, which is the opposite of how it should work.
So a stark contrast. What about safe words? That seems like a fundamental part of BDSM safety.
Absolutely fundamental. Safe words are described as holy. Red means hard stop immediately. But Christian, he ignored Anna's safe word, and he even expressed anger at her need to hold her own boundaries. Critics in the community flat out call this sexual abuse and assault.
That's pretty damning.
And there's more. Aftercare, the cuddling, the processing after intense play, that's crucial. Christian consistently denies aftercare to Anna, another major violation.
The power dynamic. Is Christian a typical dom in how he operates?
Not really, according to the sources. In real BDSM, subs often hold more power in certain ways over pain levels, toy choices, because they're the ones experiencing it.
Right.
But Christian controls every aspect. He's described more like a calculated control freak. The book also implies silence means yes, which is totally inimical to BDSM culture.
So the verdict from the community is basically...
It's not a starter's how-to guide, but a guide on what not to do.
Okay, so if it wasn't truly about the BDSM for millions of readers, then what was the deeper fantasy at play? This is where the sources suggest the real appeal lies.
Exactly. This is the core argument. Women liked 50 Shades, not mainly for the bondage, but because it is the ultimate shy female fantasy.
Which is?
An average girl tames an alpha playboy. She brings him to heel, essentially, despite his initial desire to just dominate her.
Ah, the taming fantasy. So Christian's whole arc fits into that.
Perfectly. Look at his transformation. The sources say he one by one caves to her every demand. He gives up the player lifestyle, the sex dungeon requirement, his fear of commitment, his mommy issues, his stance on kids, all of it.
He gives her everything she wants in a traditional sense.
Exactly. Normal sex, marriage, a big house to raise a family in, and fatherhood. Ultimately, the fantasy is that he submits to her.
So the sex stuff is almost window dressing.
In a way, yeah. It becomes a backdrop to this more traditional romance, and it's strongly linked to what some sources call provider porn, high status.
Provider porn.
Yeah, Anna goes from being a poor student to being flown to Paris, helicopter rides, endless gifts. She eventually owns his publishing company.
Right, there's that whole non-sexual fantasy too. Suddenly being crazy rich, your student loans gone, a prestige job.
Doing all kinds of fancy shit you don't have to plan or pay for. It's potent stuff.
And this connects to the idea of fixing the damaged man.
Definitely. The Chad figure, the untouchable alpha, the fantasy is that he stops all that for her. She alone fixes him, soothes his tortured soul with her feminine touch.
Gets him to open up, commit.
Gets him to break down and cry about his sexual trauma. Yeah, and become committed. This is classic romance novel stuff, really. Think Jane Eyre, Pamela. Christian is the demon lover, the bad boy who needs a good woman.
So the power dynamic flips. Initially, he's powerful, she's vulnerable.
But her innocence, her natural femininity, domesticates him. And the real pain Anna suffers, according to this reading, isn't physical, it's his inability to state his love for her.
It's a completely different way of looking at the whole series.
It really is. It shows how powerful those traditional romantic desires are, even when they're packaged in something that looks modern or edgy.
Okay, we've talked origins, the deeper appeal. But now the big question. How did a book so widely criticized for its bad writing become this global monster hit?
Yeah, the sources confirm the criticism: repetitive plots, flat characters, awkward prose.
So how did that sell 100 million copies?
Yeah.
It seems counterintuitive.
Well, this is where the bad writing ironically becomes a feature, not a bug. According to the sources anyway, the novel is described as digital-like and highly spreadable.
Spreadable, like a meme.
Kind of, yeah. It encourages what scholars call hyper-reading.
Hyper-reading? What's that?
Think about how you scroll through social media, skimming, scanning, jumping around, grabbing fragments. 50 Shades is apparently structured in a way that makes that easy.
How?
It literally reproduces emails and text messages visually in the book.
Yeah.
It's modular, you can easily jump around, skip parts. It makes it easy to share little bits online without spoiling the whole plot.
Like grabbing sound bites instead of reading the whole speech.
Exactly, bite-sized pieces.
So this hyper-reading is key. And that leads to this idea of effective labor, right? Both fans and anti-fans doing the work.
Precisely. Fans did effective labor sharing, quotes, building hype for the movies, huge unpaid marketing, basically.
Okay, that makes sense.
But what's wild is that even anti-fans, like the 50 Shades Soft WTF online community, did this too. They closely read it, pick it apart, satirize it for being misogynistic.
And that also helps spread it.
Apparently, yes. Both the love and the hate kept it circulating, kept it visible online. All attention was good attention, in a way.
So this whole thing really messes with traditional ideas of world literature, doesn't it?
Absolutely. It shows shows texts can blow up globally through digital networks, through fan activity, even if they aren't high literature, and it shows power shifting away from, traditional editors and critics.
Towards these online reader communities.
Exactly. They can make or break a book now. It's a fascinating snapshot of how digital media changed everything.
We've definitely peeled back a lot of layers, but while we've seen the deeper appeal, we have to address the strong critiques too, particularly about the relationship itself.
Definitely. The sources don't hold back. There are strong arguments that 50 Shades reinforces abusive gender roles. It offers this kind of faux empowerment.
Faux empowerment, how so?
Where female control just means drawing really narrow lines within an already submissive relationship, like saying no seem like this huge achievement rather than a basic right.
That sounds, deeply concerning given how many people read it.
It is. The relationship is widely described in the sources as a classic by-the-book description of a codependent relationship with an abusive partner.
That's strong language.
It is. Christian is called a brooding, damaged abuser. His heart is supposedly warming, but fundamentally he's manipulative, controlling.
Like controlling her food, her friends, travel.
Exactly. And Anna's attraction seems mostly based on his looks, the money, the gifts, despite his emotional coldness and, his desire for purely sexual domination.
There was a study looking at how young women saw the relationship in the movie, wasn't there? What did that find?
Yeah, that was revealing. It found that while the young women saw parts of it as exciting and romantic—
The fantasy parts, maybe?
Probably. But they consistently indicated an unappealing lack of health. They raised grave concerns over Christian's behavior— the stalking, controlling, manipulation, emotional abuse, his anger during sex, neglecting Anna's needs.
So they saw the red flags.
Clearly. Some tried to rationalize his behavior because of his trauma, sure. But when asked about their own lives, they were clear. They'd maybe like the adventure and gifts.
But not the rest of it.
Right. They would not tolerate being controlled and stalked, having their needs neglected, and having a partner who expressed anger in sexual interactions. Big difference between fantasy and reality.
This also brings up the whole rape fantasy debate that surrounds the book. How do the sources handle that? Especially with scenes like him breaking into her apartment.
The sources try to draw a careful distinction. They explain that fantasy rape is nothing like, and even the exact opposite of real rape.
How do they define fantasy rape then?
As being about an intense desire to be desired. Feeling so intensely desirable that he must have you. It's about the feeling of being overwhelmingly wanted, not about violence or lack of control in reality.
Okay.
But that specific break-in scene, when it moved from fan fiction, where readers maybe understood the implied consent within that character dynamic.
Right, the Twilight context again.
Exactly. When that context was stripped away for the mainstream book, the scene just reads like straight-up abuse on the page. The sources are careful to separate internal fantasy from harmful external depictions.
Wow. Okay. What a deep, really complex dive into something that seemed, pretty simple on the surface.
It's truly anything but simple once you actually start pulling back those layers, is it?
So, thinking about all this, what does it mean for you, our listener? We've learned that 50 Shades, it seems it was less about actual BDSM for most readers.
And much more about a very traditional female fantasy. Taming that powerful alpha man into commitment, family.
All wrapped up in this, glossy package of immense wealth and luxury.
And we saw how the bad writing, ironically, might have been key to its digital spread, making it easy to share, easy to talk about, easy to hyper-read.
But it also, crucially, sparked really important conversations, didn't it?
Absolutely, about consent, about healthy relationships, power dynamics, the BDSM community, feminists. They pushed back hard against the problematic portrayals.
Which prompted a much-needed critical dialogue, maybe.
You could definitely argue that. A dialogue about what healthy, consensual relationships actually look like.
So here's a final thought to leave you with. If a book with widely acknowledged bad writing and pretty problematic themes could absolutely captivate millions, just by tapping into these deep-seated romantic and maybe aspirational desires.
What does that tell us about the power of fantasy itself?
Yeah. And maybe, what does it tell us about the unspoken desires that pop culture reflects back to us? Sometimes in really surprising, maybe even controversial ways. Something to mull over.